Hey, Christy, are you able to hear me? So we're having some sound issues out there, and it might actually be on your end because I'm getting that they can't hear you. Now, let me ask, are you guys who are typing in, are you able to hear me? So anyone who typed in, go back into the private chat. All right, so they can hear me, not you. So we've been spending the last 15 minutes trying to figure this out. We've had a sound issue. Okay. All right. Sit tight for a moment. This is great. Life happens. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. I got it. So you guys can hear me. We can't hear Christy. I've gone through 3 different doctors. And
Can you hear me now?
we can read lips. It's on your end. I'll tell you what. So let's do this. Here's what I can tell you. Christy was saying the absolute best things in the world about me and about what you guys are about to experience here over the short order of the next half hour or so. I want to thank you guys for taking time to join us today. I am excited to, in general, share this kind of message with you. I've had the honor to work with Christy and Dr. Foxworth at ChiroHealthUSA since 2014, 2015 behind the scenes. I'm going to share with you a little bit about my background and kind of why I'm here and what we want to cover. But I love this. This is, when life gives you lemons, man. Well, it depends on where you are in the country. For some of us, it's lemonade. For some of us, it might be Tito's and lemonade. I don't know. But either way, we're going to make it work. So look, I clearly, if you're here, you didn't take offense at Suck It Up, You're in Sales. I've been playing with this title for a while, and Christy graciously let me stick with it. And part of the reason is let's just have some fun with it. It's okay. We are all in sales to some degree, but first we have to recognize what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and what it is we're actually selling. So let me just share a little bit about kind of my background for those of you who don't know. I started selling as a 12-year-old kid. True story, the first pair of Air Jordans came out. I'm aging myself, single mother. For those of you who have sat in on my webinars before, you might have caught this one. And so I wanted the Air Jordans, and my mom, instead of saying no, we just didn't have a lot of money. Instead of saying no, you can't have it, she said, yeah, if you can figure out a way to earn half the money legally, and that's the important part, then I'll figure out how to come up with the other half. And what was so cool about this is it really switched my brain from no to how. And once I switched from no to how, it changed everything. So literally as a 12-year-old, I'm knocking on doors. I live in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm knocking on doors for the Des Moines Register, which was our newspaper. And every time somebody new signed up for the Des Moines Register, I got $3. And I paid for my shoes on my own in a week. And what I learned then is I had the freedom to kind of go generate and write my own story. And part of it was just simple acceptance. And that's part of why I want to do this webinar today. I get to travel all over the country. I do a lot of speaking, both in and out of chiropractic. We'll touch on that. But I can't tell you how many, especially offices and practices I've encountered that want their team to help produce and help recommend and help sell the right way. And yet they've never invested in any kind of a sales course or any kind of formal training. So today, over the next, half hour or so, we're going to move fast, but I'm going to throw quite a few things at you. And my goal is that everyone on the call has 2 or 3 tangible takeaways as we go through the day. So my 12-year-old self sticks in sales. I continue to sell. For those of you, again, old enough to remember Kirby vacuum cleaners, as a senior in high school, I was the guy calling everybody to set up those appointments for them, which you talk about boiler room sales back in the late 80s and early 90s. But it was really good. So I learned a lot about transactional selling at that point in time. It then moved on to take over different teams. I was a sales manager for WorldCom. So in my 20s, I had almost 200 people reporting to me, which was a great, great experience. As you can see, I took a team that was number 444 out of 446, and we were number 2 in 6 months. You know, my favorite part of the story is not that we were number 2 in 6 months. It's that 6 months after that, almost everybody wanted to quit. And the reason they wanted to quit is I sucked as a leader at the time. I was leading them the way I wanted to be led or the way I was wired. And having everybody in my 20s and having my ego take that hit in my 20s was really, truly one of the best lessons I could have ever been given. It really happened for me because it reminded me that we're all different and we're all motivated in a different way. As a matter of fact, I've been really talking about this book lately, The 6 Types of Working Genius from Patrick Lencioni. If you've ever read any of Patrick Lencioni's book, this is a great one. But the net of it is, no matter who we are, we each have 2 types of working genius. And as you see at the bottom, I'm actually writing a book called My Narcissism is Special. You cannot steal that. But if you know anything about that kind of a phrase, my narcissism is special, then you know that I thought I had all 6 types of working genius. Even though I was told I'm only going to have 2, I'm for sure going to have all 6. Well, guess what? I have 2. And so do you. And there are 2 things you're probably pretty good at, and then there are 2 things you shouldn't do. But the reason why this is so important is because once we identify what we excel at and then what we should have other people do, it frees us up. And so for me, I've taken that kind of thought process going all the way back to what I learned at WorldCom, and I've run it all the way through today. I took over a software company in sales in the 2009, 2010, and we sold it in 2013, and that was great. And then I started my consulting company, SalesWorks, in 2015. And truly all I do now is I work with small companies, $20 million and below. I call them the jet skis of the world. I don't like big companies. They're ocean liners. We all know what happened to the Titanic. They knew there was an iceberg coming and they couldn't move to stop it. I like jet skis. For any of you who've ever been on one or ever tipped one over or ever turned, you can turn fast, you can make a mistake, and you can recover. I love small businesses. Plus, we're so passionate about small businesses that I learned so much on the background. And what I've learned through the years is small thinking creates big problems. And we're going to touch on that a little bit. Just plugging a future product I have coming or project, 2 Broke Knees, hashtag 2 Broke Knees. It's another book I'm writing. And again, for those of you who have been around, you've heard me talk about kind of the recovery for some pretty big injuries I had years ago and the thought process that goes with that. But it's really the same thought process that I put into building teams and building businesses straight across the board. So sales, right? If you read it, it's okay. And once you accept it, man, it is powerful. So what is sales? How is it defined? And you can look at different definitions, but really any or all activities involved in selling a product or a service to a consumer or business. So guess what, my friends? We're all in sales. We're all in sales. We're all in some form of sales. And the difference is those of us who have accepted it are practicing it regularly to get better at it versus running from it. You invested, depending on when you graduated, tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you invested in here, your brain. And that product is now coming out here and here, your mouth and your hands. And that's important first to identify what is the product, what is it I'm selling? Because once you identify that, then you start to maximize what's happening. But right now, people are paying for your expertise, the time you've invested to learn, and then overall, the practice and the outcomes that you have are going to help your continued success. So don't be afraid to actually value your services. Why? Because you paid for them. And that's the first step in acceptance, is to understand that we're all in it and we all should value it. So as we look at it, there are really 2 types of sales I want you to look at and understand. One, product sales. So for instance, those of you who have, let's say my last name's Reynolds, it is Reynolds, so we'll call it Reynolds Health and Wellness. If I'm running a health and wellness practice and all I do is just adjust, that's it, then I'm not taking advantage of what I've called my practice or my clinic versus what I'm offering. Because health and wellness implies I'm going above and beyond. The adjustment is absolutely the core in everything that's happening. But if it's truly health and wellness, doesn't it go above and beyond that, straight across the board? Versus, let's say I just walk into a practice and all they're going to do is simply adjust. And that's okay. I'm not here to tell you what kind of practice you should run. I want you to identify the type of practice you do run so you can properly communicate about it. So if you're in a product sale, you sell something physical, something tangible. So going back to Reynolds Health and Wellness, yes, I might adjust, but I also might do pillows from time to time if it makes sense. Or I might have ancillary services. I might have nutrition that's in my office. I might do orthotics in my office. So those are tangible products that someone can pay for and actually walk out leaving it or leave the building knowing exactly what they got. The adjustment is a little bit more difficult. It's service-based, and services at times are more difficult to sell than tangible products because you have to make sure the other person on the other end understands the value, A, and B, is with you long enough to understand the value. And that's key, with you long enough to understand the value. So again, if in your practice today, you're doing just a straight adjustment, straightforward, then you're going to fall under the service sales. You're providing a service. If in fact you've got the adjustment and you're selling products, you're going to fall under both. And not always the same person sells the same type. Some people are really good at widgets or products, and other people are good at services. Why? Because in order to sell a service, you have to tell a story. You have to paint a picture. For those of you who want to learn more about storytelling, I think it's Carmine Gallo who wrote The Storyteller's Secret. It's a wonderful book that talks about leaders and their efficacy communicating historically. And I'll tell you, the best communicators speak at around a 6th grade level, because that's what we understand, which is a challenge as well, especially if you listen to my last sentence. So just remember, as we go through this, service sales is about telling a good story. It's about painting the picture. And really, it's about laying groundwork that draws people in, but you have to know how to communicate to do it. And that's key in what we're trying to accomplish. Sales sometimes can have a negative connotation with it. As a matter of fact, any profession can have a negative connotation with it. And if you're on this call and you're being honest, you know the stigmas that this profession fights on a daily basis. And I personally recognize the stigma that being in sales fights on a daily basis. And what's so interesting is, again, when I started in sales, it was cutthroat. It was door to door. It was taking names out of a phone book. It was, as we go through this, really that boiler room. But now it's like everything else. It's a science. We look at the different types of personalities. We build funnels. As you see my sales work logo, it's the funnel. We start wide, but then we start to narrow down so we can rinse and we repeat. We look at the metrics. We look at the indicators. We look at all of those things, and those take time. Those take time. But what I want you to have today when you walk away is some tangible takeaways from a methodology that I believe works. Now, remember, every salesperson, go back to my narcissism is special. If someone's out there teaching sales, then of course their narcissism is special a little bit, and they probably think they have the way. Well, I'm here to tell you I don't have the way. I have a way. And I will share with you that my way may not work for everybody else. Because for me, I have to be invested. I have to believe in the product. I honestly have to be able to buy the product. If I wouldn't buy it myself or use it myself, then it's not something that I can get behind or recommend. So I say no way more than I say yes, right? No is not as good as yes, but it beats the heck out of maybe. If I'm not committed, it's a maybe. And I can't give you my best if it's a maybe. I want to be in the trenches. If I'm going to ask you to do something, I don't want it to be something I'm not willing to do. I'm passionate about this. I don't mind losing as we move through it. So these are just kind of my cores, my values when I'm looking at selling something. One, you've got to be authentic. You must believe. If you don't believe, people are going to see right through it. You can tell when someone's doing it for the money versus for the right reason. And what I've found is in my life, I have made decisions for the money before. And even if I've gotten the money, it's not been fun. It's not worth it. It's not rewarding. When you do it for the right reason, the reward never stops. So you have to be authentic. It's being intentional. It's being smart about what you're choosing. So if there's a product you're offering that you wouldn't use or you don't believe works, then you owe it to the people you're selling not to push that product anymore. That way, when you're behind a product, you can really push, and not push in his way, but push in a way that's authentic because you believe in it. I know this is going to help. For instance, It's very hard to say to someone, if you eat right, exercise more, and get regular adjustments, that you will not live a better life. It's universal. It just works. So we can all believe in that. Think money aside. So when I was growing up in sales, there were a whole bunch of different techniques. And for any of you who have been through some old sales training, it kind of started with door-to-door sales people, and then you went into like Cutco knives, and they were infamous for feel, felt, found, right? I understand how you feel. I felt the same way too. Here's what I found. Well, now that's platitudinal. You call tier 1 customer service and they say, I understand. No, you don't, because you're not going to solve the problem. So we have to really start to think about how we want to communicate so we're not salesy. So a lot of the old sales techniques that used to be used don't work anymore because we all know too much. 60 to 70, if not more percent of our buying decision is made before we even show up because of the amount of research that's at our fingertips because of our smart technology. So one of the closes that I have used through the years, and it always works, is when you're making a recommendation, when your staff's making it, when you make it, think money aside. And that simply means this: I'm going to put money aside. I'm going to assume that no matter what I recommend, you can afford. So I'm always going to recommend not more than you need, exactly what you need. But when it's done right, you're not putting pressure on someone else. You're not saying, hey, you need to get these 5 things. Oh, and if you don't, you're a failure. No one wants that. In this practice, we're going to make recommendations. We're going to recommend in a perfect world. In a perfect world, here is what I'd like you to do. Most of us don't live in a perfect world. So after I make these recommendations, let's work together to figure out what makes the most sense for you. You see, I'm now an advocate. I now have laid out the framework where I might recommend 5 things. But the difference between a practice that I might be coaching and a practice that you might be in today is because you're afraid of the recommendation, you recommend 1 thing. And then you're stuck trying to upsell to a second thing. Well, in my world, I'm going to lay out all 5 things. And I'm going to let them self-identify what are the 2 or 3 most important things with my help. And then if we can financially make it work, let's go with 2 or 3. And when you start to look at averages over time, if all of my people are looking at 3 to 5 options or 2 to 3 options, and your people are looking at 1, possibly 2, you can start to see where my side of the house is going to win over time. And it has nothing to do with being salesy. It has everything to do with believing in what we do and making the right recommendation. I was actually just in a veterinarian clinic a week ago or a few weeks back teaching their staff. They had 50 people in the clinic. And when they contracted me, it's like, Aaron, we want them to upsell. Now in the vet clinic, they have quite a few more tangible things. It could be dog toys, or it could be food, or it could be any other thing that they want them to sell. But the reality is I sat and I said, great, I see that there's a little bit of frustration between management and staff, and you want them to get there. But let me start with you, ownership and leadership. Tell me 1 sales course you took. And 0 hands went up. And you heard me touch on this earlier. And I said, now go to your staff and tell me 1 sales course that you know they've taken. Anything that's helped them communicate. And not a single hand went up. They couldn't say it. So we had expectation without agreement. They didn't have this skill set to do what I just did. Let's just put money aside for a moment. In a perfect world, this is what my recommendation is going to be, but we're going to work with you on your behalf to make this work. And then you have to be authentic. And I want you to see that next line. You have to be intentional with your listening. Remember, when they're talking, they're actually buying. When you're talking, you're selling. And so you want to create an environment where you ask the right questions that get them talking so you can gather information. Because when you gather information, you can get to this next point. And if you're taking notes, this is key. You have to establish expectation and agreement. Expectation and agreement. And so often when I'm working with businesses, there's expectation, but there's no agreement. We want our team to do more, so we tell them to do more. That's your expectation. But if they have agreed to it, have they actually said, yes, we can increase our average revenue per client based on the front of the house products by 25% in 2023? Now that sounds like something management might come up with and pass down, but have you guys established expectation and agreement? And I promise you, if you haven't, it's going to fail. And it's not personal. It's just we're not on the same page and we haven't asked the right questions. We've just laid out unrealistic expectations. So be authentic. Think money aside. What recommendation would you make if you knew money were not an obstacle? Be intentional with your listening. Be intentional with your listening and establish expectation and agreement. So in order to do this, you have to understand the two types of questions, and there's two of them. You have an open-ended question, a question that requires respondents to provide an answer in their own words. What did you think of your first visit here in our clinic? You have a closed-ended question to which an answer must be selected from a limited set, basically yes or no. Did you like your first visit here in our clinic? It's a terrible question, by the way. It's a terrible question. Why? Because people are afraid of conflict right out of the gate. How often, think of yourself, how often has someone asked you a yes or no question where you just defaulted to yes because you don't want to get into the conflict? They've asked you a poor close-ended question. You're not gaining information. You're not thinking like a detective. Remember, sales isn't just pushing at someone. It's really asking the right question to facilitate good conversation. And thinking beyond that, it's really making people feel comfortable with enough so their wall goes down so you can have a good exchange of information. You establish trust. Open-ended questions do that. What did you think about your first visit? And they tell you. And ask a follow-up question. Is there anything we could do better? Now that might be yes or no, but there's a follow-up to that. What is it? What would you change? Ask and have somebody ask. And don't drill people. Don't try and get all the answers from one person just because they're willing to talk. It's one of the things I hate about polls. The people who have the time to fill out the polls are not necessarily the people I want to hear from. So the patient who has time to sit and talk with you for 3 hours, while that's great, is not necessarily the patient you want to hear from. You want to hear from the person who has absolutely no time so you can figure out how to tweak what you're doing to fit their need while also serving the other patient. So I want you guys to start to practice as a team on open and close-ended question. Open, who, what, when, where, why, and how. And you don't have to practice on chiropractic specific questions, just practice on questions. Oh, and by the way, take this home with you. You'll find out how powerful they are. And a close-ended question is that just that. You're not really looking for an open answer. You're guiding the conversation. And there's a time and a place for that, especially when you're trying to help someone get out of their own way. You help them start to say yes. But those are the two main types of questions that you have out there. And so ask yourself and your team what kind of questions you guys are asking. And depending on the situation, this is a great place to start practicing. Now remember, I told you I'm going to throw a lot at you, and I'm going to do it in very short order. So here's your first homework for your staff and team meetings. That's right. And if you're not having staff and team meetings, I can't see you right now, but I'm giving you the look. I'm giving you the look because we're not going to get better unless we make time to practice. We're going to talk about that. Oh, it's almost like I knew this was coming up. So if anything I give you today, we've identified already the difference between a tangible sale, like a product, and service. You know the difference already. You know where you guys fall. You can identify. You know the difference between open and close-ended questions. This is key because if you don't know those, we're not going to get better in our communication. But you have to identify those things out of the gate. Who are we? What do we sell? What do we offer? What is the experience like? Think of that word. What's the patient experience like? Because that's what you're selling, and your care is just a part of it. Just a part of it. I promise you, they're judging you from the second they get out of your car. And if your parking lot sucks, they're judging you there too. I'm dead serious. So I like to think of every business like manufacturing. Start to break down every piece of the patient journey into manufacturing, from the time that they make a phone call into your staff to the time that they show up. Are you on time or do you run behind? Is your waiting room clean or is it not? Are you up to date or are you not? Is it easy to get in and out or is it not? These are all the places you have to look because they're all part of the sales process, not just the communication. Do you make it easy for them to pay? Do you make it easy for them to reschedule? Do you make it easy for them to leave and come back? Do you, there's a theme, do you make it easy for them to have an exceptional experience when they've chosen you? Because if they have an exceptional experience, they stay. And if they stay, they get better. And if they get better, they refer. And this kind of thing repeats. And a lot of you have figured this one out. So practice makes perfect. This is key. Have you invested in your team, or do you hope? For those of you who read, hope is not a strategy. You have to invest in your team. And role playing is the key to confidence. There isn't a single client I work with that I don't make role play. I was speaking to a group of about 30 multi-million-dollar veterinary practices in Napa Valley in the first part of this month. And so, I mean, these guys are running huge practices. One of the guys had 5 or 6 hospitals in California alone. So big practices. And the same thing is coming up. We want them to do better. We want them to upsell. We want them to do this. We want them to do that. And I ask them, well, tell me what steps you've taken to invest in your team to get a different outcome. And how often do you role play with your team? Sit down. And for so many of the folks, it's, I don't have time. Well, we need to make time, and we're going to touch on that. So I'm going to give you an exercise that I do with all of my clients. And if Christy's volume is working when we're done, she can attest to it. If we were physically in the office in Mississippi, I'd have her go grab it. But this exercise is called the cup. If we want to get better, we have to practice. So I want you to take 2 cups. We use red Solo cups. The first part of the exercise is to identify up to 10 scenarios you face daily. And I promise you, getting to 10 is going to be a challenge. There's 3 or 4 there's a shopper call that's coming in. There's a rescheduled call. There's going to, do you guys take this? What about that? You guys collectively as a team sit there and you think about your 10 scenarios, and getting through numbers 1 through 5 are going to be easy. Getting through 6 through 10 is going to be a challenge, because it's kind of the 80-20 rule, right? We spend 80% of our time solving 20% of the problems. It's that 80-20 rule. So once you've identified the 10 scenarios, you write them down, you cut them up, you drop them in a cup. Then you take every team member, and yes, every team member, whether they are actually patient or client facing or not, because the way we lift up the entire business is we get input from everybody. You'd be amazed at people who don't actually speak to other people, what input they have and what best practices they have, because their brain is working behind the scenes. So we're going to go through this. So then it works like this. I pull a random name out of the cup. I pull a random scenario out of the cup. I read off the scenario, and they have to answer. Now, before you do this the first time, remember, you identify the scenarios, but you also go through the scenarios collectively as a team, so you start to gain consensus, okay? And here's the other thing. You're going to be embarrassed. I wrote it in orange at the bottom. It's going to hurt a bit at first, but the long-term impact is invaluable. And what's funny is it almost becomes everybody's favorite exercise. It truly is a love-hate, because there's nothing more empowering than it. Fail behind the scenes, behind closed doors. Laugh at it together collectively. You will all fail out of the gate, but you do this enough just once a week, and you're going to all get better. It's impossible to not get better. And at some point, someone's going to say something that's a nugget. Someone will say something that's an absolute nugget, and you're going to be like, holy smokes, we need to rinse and repeat that. So I'll share with you, I'll give you an example of a nugget. We all, especially I've been working in this profession now since 2008. I was introduced to it in 2003, 2002. And so once I got into the profession, of course, then I start to learn the nuances of the different types of practices and the different types of philosophies or ideologies. And like anything, you start to say, okay, great. Well, if I'm on this side and I say X, and I'm on this side and I say Y, then oftentimes we're going to find ourselves bumping heads. But through talking with enough people, I heard someone say, listen, regardless of what camp you're in, we can pretty much all agree on this. We believe in non-surgical and non-pharmacological care for our patients, and that's where it should start. And you know what? regardless of the camp anyone's in chiropractic, I have used this now for 2 straight years, and I'm not seeing a single person push back because you can't argue it. It's somewhat the perfect statement because it's true. We collectively do believe in non-surgical, non-pharmacological care. Now, how we go about it's going to be different, but philosophically, we can find that, yes, we can get there. And you're going to find the same thing happens in your practice by doing this role-playing exercise. So it's important that you guys get there, the cup, and if you have questions, let us know. Ooh, I love it. I see some of you guys have small practices. This is even better. You're going to love this exercise because you will be exposed, plus you'll learn faster. So whether you're a big practice or a small practice, this exercise absolutely works. And it also ensures we have a common denominator because there's nothing more confusing than getting 3 different answers when you go to one place. And that's what starts to impact people's overall experience, their trust factor. Once you've identified how to have the conversation, once you've identified how to ask the right questions, once you've gone through this role-playing activity, you will self-identify who is your closer, who should be having the conversation. And don't take it personally. If you think it's you and it's not you, business is business, personal is personal. We each have 2 of the 6 skill sets in the 6 Types of Working Genius, which was the first book I mentioned a little bit earlier. So if you look at it, you might think you have all 6, chief cook and bottle washer, right? But you just don't, no matter who you are. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So don't think of a closer as an aggressive term. It's not. It's just who has the best skill set to have the conversation in the building to have the financial conversation. That's just it. That's all it is. Is it the doctor? Maybe. It might be. Is it the team? It's possible. Might be. Don't know. Are you missing this person? Yeah, you could be. You could be. Especially if you've gone through life saying, I'm not a salesperson, so I don't want to have this. No. You want someone to commit to care, to make an investment so they stay with you, so you can have better outcomes. You want to improve the likelihood of not only them getting better, but bringing everybody back in. So look around your office today and say, who is your closer? Who has the skill set to be there? And it's not the most aggressive, the most boisterous person. It just isn't. It's who can be most relatable and communicate not in a way so they're understood, but communicate so clearly that they can't be misunderstood. I love this comment up there. I don't want it to be me, but it might be me. I know. And that's okay. And it's liberating once you accept it. And the same way that you may not want it to be you in other practices and in other teams, it might be someone who no one's identified yet. So we have to look at that. So remember, friends, we've got some tangible takeaways. I'm going to wrap this up, send you guys back to work for the day, kind of drinking water through the fire hose, but I've given you some strong, tangible takeaways because our goal is simple: empower your team. When your team can look like this young lady, we can feel her. If you're looking at this picture and you can't feel her, you had a bad morning. And that's okay, just know you had a bad morning. Because if you're in a healthy place and you can't feel like she's gonna go break down every barrier we put in front of her, then we're missing. Because that's our goal. Look at our team and ask, have we empowered them so they feel like this? We can't feel like this all day, every day. That's unrealistic. But as long as we're making small, tangible, incremental changes along the way, our team is going to feel like this. So remember the money aside close. Teach your team how to think and communicate by putting money aside. Assuming it's not an issue, let's make the right recommendation. And then if money is an issue, solve it. Solve it. Be an advocate for them. Truly, there are wonderful options. Well, ChiroHealthUSA is a prime example. I appreciate them having me today. But you know, when I started working with them years ago, I thought it was about discounting from the outside in. And what I realized is it's not that at all. It's about being as aggressive as you can be with your fee schedule, and then having tools to meet the people who have financial insecurities or insurance challenges or overall deductible challenges. So instead of a race to the bottom, it's be as aggressive as you can be and then use tools to meet this subset versus making sure I build my whole business around this subset. Think about it logically. I don't want to race to the bottom. I want to value my services. I invested tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. I want to maximize my fees, but I also want to serve people. So solve problems as they arise. Role play. Once your team is comfortable with this exercise, it'll be a game changer. And read those last lines. Everyone makes a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Get comfortable with it. It's okay. Invest. If you want your team to grow in any area, you must make time. Don't tell me you don't have time. None of it has to become a priority. If you're not willing to make time, don't complain about it. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. And then be sincere. Regardless of who has the financial conversation with the patient has to feel like you're advocating for them, not working against them, not beating down because they can't follow your recommendations. Meet them where they are, take them where you want them to go, but try and establish expectation and agreement, because when you do these things, you'll be amazed at what happens, not only from a patient retention standpoint, but a patient growth standpoint, or what I call CAC, customer acquisition. It's a lot easier for Christy to bring in the people she knows than for me to try and find the people she knows, communicate with the people she knows, and convince them to come in. So to end today, look, truly, for those of you who have been around ChiroHealthUSA, Dr. Foxworth, Christy Hudson, you know no one cares more about the profession. No one does more for the profession. Working with a lot of clients in the profession, I have a unique perspective. I just can't thank them enough for having kind of the guts to put on a webinar like this. That's not always about the practice of chiropractic, but more understanding how do I take skill sets and apply them. I appreciate each and every one of you who made time for today. And I promise you we'll be back. So until next time, thank you so much for your time. I hope you got a great 2 or 3 takeaways from this. And feel free, that's my QR code. I am slow to respond. It is one of my bottom 6 geniuses because I'd much rather be doing this than admin work. So don't take it personally. I will get back to you. Thank you for your time.
Can y'all hear me now?
We still can't hear. I can't hear. Can you guys hear Christy? Anyone? I'll let you guys keep going. All right. So I'm going to wrap up for her. What she said was, Aaron was great. He brought on exactly what we want. They can hear you. So I can't hear me and you. So they can't hear me. Or you.
Can y'all talk about some crazy technical issue? I can hear him. He can't hear me. Y'all can hear me and y'all can hear him. So thank you for being the bridge of the gap. Thank y'all so much for joining the webinar today. I hope you really enjoyed it. Our next webinar is on Thursday, April 20th with Dr. Mark Student. It's called Getting Paid for What You Do. Are y'all noticing a theme here? Make sure you go to the website at ChiroHealthUSA.com/webinars. We've got webinars posted through July. And if you have suggestions for what you'd like to hear about and who you'd like to hear from, email me, Christy@ChiroHealthUSA.com. Y'all, it's been an amazing day, and I hope you have an epic week. Bye, y'all.